Hello everyone and welcome to another in my constructed video series. This is Brian Kibler with StarCityGames.com, and as you can see on your screen, today we're going to be playing some Modern. We're going to be playing a bit more with the Wiltleaf Liege Abzan deck. This is actually the exact list that I played in the Grand Prix in Vancouver, where I finished in 61st place with a record of, what was it, 11-5? I don't know. I don't even know how many rounds there were. Yeah, no, 10-5, 10-5, something like that. But I felt like I got a little bit unfortunate in the matchups that I got and some of the exact ways some of my matchups went. I really like the deck, and I think that it is a pretty strong choice in the format right now. Also lets me play with a lot of my favorite cards. I really like playing with Noble Hierarch into 3-cost green creature, and Modern is the only place you can do that. And I think this is one of the better versions of a green creature deck that's available in the format. So the big differences in this deck compared to previous versions is actually just the sideboard. The main deck is exactly the same main deck that I played at the Pro Tour, and the sideboard is where the big differences are. Sideboarding in Modern is probably the most important part of the format in a lot of ways. Cyber cards in Modern are so powerful. There are so many cyber cards that have such a huge impact on your chances of winning any given matchup that sideboarding is a huge element of what's actually going on in the format. And that's why I think that you can see some pretty pretty significant differences in sideboards, even among the exact same main deck from tournament to tournament. And playing in the Pro Tour, I expected a lot of both Abzan and Burn, which ultimately were the two most popular decks, as well as a reasonable amount of Blue-Red, Jeskai, sort of mid-range control style decks, and those didn't really show up that much. So I moved a lot away from that, and I showed a lot of those changes that I made in my last video that I did for Star City Games. But I also wanted to experiment with some other cards that you have here. So the big new card here is a little weird one. It's Aethersworn Canonist. And Aethersworn Canonist was actually a recommendation from Jerry Thompson. He was talking about potentially playing the Wiltleaf deck at the Grand Prix, and we discussed sort of thoughts on possible cyber cards and things like that. And he suggested Canonist. And he suggested Canonist as both a sort of replacement for the Chalice Rule of Law slot against decks like Storm or Living End or whatever, but also because it is a potentially powerful card against decks like Infect and Burn. That may seem a little strange to you because those aren't decks that are based around Storm comboing or Cascade or anything like that, but they are decks that are based around being able to play a bunch of cheap spells quickly. And if you have an Aethersworn Canonist against a deck like Infect, they can't play multiple spells at a turn and kill you. They can't play any sort of pump effect and protection effect, and your removal gets tons better against them. Those of you who did watch my last video set may remember the game where I played against an Infect opponent, where I had a Chalice of the Void that I actually just didn't play for quite a while, and it was a little bit awkward because I had my own Thought Seizes, I had Path to Exiles, and I didn't want to lock those out by playing Chalice. But with Canonist, you can play Canonist, and Canonist can attack, which is a big deal compared to Chalice. Not only playing Canonist, so you're not locking your own spells out, but you're actually deploying a creature that pressures your opponent and actually puts them under a clock, and that's a big deal. Having cards that are inherently purely reactive compared to cards that can pressure your opponent's life total and actually end the game, and that is the category that Canonist falls into. Similarly, against like Burn, for instance, Burn, you have some draws where you could really use a card like Chalice to lock out their ability to actually use any of their burn spells, but probably more often you end up in a race situation. You end up in a situation where you have creatures and you're attacking them and they need to just burn you out, and you have maybe some amount of life gain effects. And I think that Canonist is in some ways potentially better than Chalice there. It's possible that it's not not quite the same. And the big net downside to Canonist specifically against Burn is that in a lot of cases people actually bring in Destructive Revelry for fear of Leyline, and that actually makes either Chalice or Canonist potentially even a liability in those matchups. So I'm a little up in the air as to how valuable it is there. But I do think that it seems like a pretty strong card against Infect, and I wanted to give it a shot. I actually, at no point, played Canonist in the entire Grand Prix, despite sideboarding it in several times. And still I'm sort of like looking to field test it, and hopefully get a chance to play with it today. So anyway, that's the deck that I'm going to be playing with, and yeah, let's get to work.